Welcome back to Helping Families Go Beyond, the podcast by Beyond the Spectrum. I am your host, Loryn Carpenter, and we are in the month of June. Our families are on summer break, and we are starting up summer camp, and we are so excited to have some of our learners here for the summer and participate in our camps. And so we're going to be doing some really fun themes like Disney, STEM, heroes, and animals. And so we just hope that our families that are not with us during the summer and that are enjoying their vacations and their time off from school. But so we're still here, admin is still here, and I just want to share a little bit about our guest for this month. We are so excited to feature Dr. Kevin Spencer, who is just about everything in the book from my conversation with him. He is a magician that also has lots and lots of experience with special education, and he's worked with special needs students, veterans, seniors, and does an incredible job of integrating magic in lots of healing, restorative ways. And so our conversation today is going to focus on the benefits of magic and the ways that it can be incorporated in classrooms, at home. Without further ado, here is Dr. Kevin Spencer. All right. Well, we are delighted to have you here with us today on this episode, Dr. Spencer. And so for some of our listeners who may not be familiar with your work yet, if you could just introduce yourself and maybe share some of the work that you've done for our community.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Kevin Spencer. Kevin. I just like that. Kevin, I have kind of this interesting sort of credential stack. For 30 years, I was a professional magician. I traveled with the largest theatrical touring illusion show in the US for about 22 of those years. Through a series of events that we'll talk about a little bit more, my focus shifted away from using magic as an entertainment art form to using magic as both an educational and a clinical intervention with lots of different populations. So kind of full circle. I'm a professor, I'm faculty at Carlow University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I teach a course on the intersection of art and disability. I'm also, yeah, it's such a fun course. I started with special education students, and then I got some gen ed students, and then I got some art therapy, and then art education, then early childhood, then psychology, then social work. So honestly, I don't know who I teach anymore, but it's but it's a really, really fun class. I also serve on faculty at Harvard University's Pediatric Sedation Outside of the Operating Room conference, where I get to talk about the passive aspects of using a magic trick. Um, I am a subject matter expert for the State Department on arts integration for special populations. So, any of our embassies around the world that recognize disability or trauma as a part of their program mission statement, I have an opportunity to go to those countries and work with the organizations our embassy supports, which is great fun. I'm a research consultant with the Arts and Medicine program at the University of Alabama, and I also work with the graduate occupational therapy students in the School of Health Professions at UAB. So kind of thrown out there, little
Yeah.
all over the place.
Yeah, that's incredible. I remember when we were scheduling this, just the schedule you gave me for availability, it was jam packed, and it was like you were going to be in Oshkosh, and then you were going to be in Uganda, and it was just all this fascinating traveling. And I'm like, that must be such a fun gig. That's such fun work.
It is a fun gig for sure. I get to teach. Basically, I have wonderful universities that understand me. And I get to basically teach in a different city every week, working with the very children and adolescents and adults that we're going to be talking about, as well as teachers and parents and caregivers and researchers. It's just who gets to grow up and do this, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a magician, but who gets to grow up and do this with magic? So I have a pretty great job.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And so you've been doing magic for all of these years. And so what was the moment that kind of made you realize that magic could be integrated in such a meaningful way even beyond the stage? Was there a moment or was there an experience that kind of flipped that switch for you?
That's a great question. For a long time, I saw magic the way most people do, as entertainment. Something that happens on the stage, makes people go, and then they all go home. But there was a moment that completely changed how I thought about this. I had a personal experience that made me look at magic in a really different way. My wife and I were volunteers at a local hospital, and the director of rehab asked if I could teach a few magic tricks to some stroke patients who were in rehab that summer. What we saw was that the magic tricks were actually helping these patients improve many of the skills that they found challenging. But the big moment came for me when I had this grandfather who was so excited about the magic tricks he'd been learning all week say, "My grandkids are coming to visit this weekend. What would I rather say to them? Hey, watch Grandpa put these pegs in a board, or let Grandpa show you a magic trick." So I think that was the moment for me that it really clicked. We weren't just watching entertainment anymore. It was really about engagement, it was about connection, it was about this person who had been locked inside of himself and he found this doorway to come out. And it just happened to be wrapped in a little bit of wonder and a rubber band. So I started to ask these questions like, why did that work? What was actually happening in this guy's brain and in his body and in that interaction? And the more we dug in, talking to the occupational therapist, to the physical therapist, the neuroscientists, the more I realized that magic is more than a performance art. It's a delivery system. It can help build fine motor skills, it can develop working memory. But I think the big thing is it creates a safe space for people who struggle with things like social interaction to suddenly be the one with something interesting to share. So it builds connection and it reduces social anxiety. So that was decades ago when I had that first experience. And so I think that gave me a whole new look at what magic was all about.
That's wonderful. And so it sounds like the benefits are kind of both social and sensory. And so it sounds like it can kind of work in both of those ways, which is amazing. That's something I didn't even realize how all of those factors could come into play to make it such a successful intervention.
It's pretty cool. I think magic is really different than most other art forms
Yeah,
because magic is the only art form that requires an audience. So you
true.
can sing for yourself, you can dance for yourself, draw for yourself, write a story for yourself, recite poetry for yourself, but you can't do a magic trick for yourself.
Right. Right.
And so that social connection is such an important part of the motivation that makes this work.
That's incredible. Because that's something a lot of our learners here, that's something that they struggle with every day is wanting to make friends and wanting to have conversations and experiences with people, and so magic's a perfect thing. So, who knew? That's amazing when you think about it that way. That's great. And so, can you kind of explain what happens maybe on, like, a cognitive level, what's happening in the mind of a neurodiverse participant or someone that you're working with when they are engaged in a magic trick? What's happening? What's happening
All
there?
right. So I'm just going to warn you, this is one of my favorite things to talk about
Cool. That's
because
awesome.
because what's happening in the brain during a magic trick is genuinely remarkable. And for a neurodiverse learner, it's even more so. I've had wonderful conversations about this with neuroscientists at the Center for Brain Health in Dallas, which just kind of blows me away anyway. But so I'm going to try and walk you through it as I understand it. So, when someone is engaged in a magic trick, several systems in their brain are firing all at the same time. You've got attention because they have to focus on what's happening in front of them. You've got working memory because they're holding on to that information, like which card did they pick or which hand do they have the ball in. But you've also got prediction because our brain builds these schemas, right? These file folders of the way things are supposed to work. And based on those file folders, we make predictions based on those experiences. So the brain is constantly trying to guess what's going to happen next. And then magic does something really beautiful. It violates those predictions. And that unexpected outcome just kind of goes, what? When the brain encounters that gap between what's expected and what actually happened, it releases this burst of dopamine and it lights up regions of our brain that are associated with curiosity and with learning. So, for a neurodiverse participant, that whole sequence can be really transformative. Many of the kids that I work with on the autism spectrum, for example, struggle with joint attention, that ability to share focus with somebody else on the same object or event. Magic is pretty much a joint attention machine because the trick gives them a reason to look where you're looking, a reason to share that experience with you, and to do it in a way that feels safe and motivating instead of like putting demands on them. So then that's what's happening on in all that cognitive level. And then you add in the motor piece. When they actually learn to perform the trick themselves, you're activating fine motor planning, sequencing, bilateral coordination, all the things that an occupational therapist would normally have to work very hard to motivate a child to participate. And because they want to fool their family or surprise their teacher, they're going to practice that move 100 times without complaining about it because the motivation is built into that. Uh, for any like OTs that might be listening to the podcast, this really does fall within the theoretical framework of the model of human occupation, which is just this idea that patients get motivated about the things that bring them joy. So people are motivated to engage in a magic trick. There's this process of turning that magic trick into a routine, developing the physical and mental competencies to be able to execute the moves to perform the magic trick. And then all of that reinforcement that comes in, both physical, social, cultural, all of that reinforcement that says, hey, you need to learn another magic trick. And I think the thing that I find most moving um, is this idea that for a child or an adolescent or an adult who's spent most of their life being told what they can't do, they can't sit still. They can't make eye contact. They can't follow directions the way other kids do. Magic lets them flip that script. And suddenly they can do something that the adults in their life can't do. They have a skill, they have a moment of mastery. And that shift in their identity from someone who struggles to someone who amazes, that's not just a cognitive shift. That's really something deeper. That's about a kid starting to see themselves differently. So, cognitively, you've got attention, memory, prediction, motor planning, social engagement. All of those things are firing all at one time. But underneath all of that, you've got self concept being rewritten in real time. And to me, I think that makes this work really powerful.
Yeah, what a powerful thing. Because I mean, I think that's something neurotypical people don't even think about is how that can just kind of awake something in somebody like that. Just wow. When you frame it that way, it's just such a powerful thing.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and I've seen it just work on like in so many ways, and it works organically. You're not
Yeah.
working like at finding a way that this is going to connect with somebody. It just kind of connects.
Yeah, absolutely. What sorts of activities do you think have you seen that kind of spark in? What sorts of tricks have been some of your participants' favorites?
Oh, how much I love this question because the favorites aren't always what you'd expect them to be.
Mhm.
One of the all-time favorites, one that like everybody that I work with remembers when I come back and work with them again. They're always like, "Are you going to do that SpongeBob trick?" It's like that one just gets embedded in their brain, and it's this whole thing where you just have like two little red balls. Um, You make one of them disappear and it reappears someplace else, and then you put that little red ball in their hand. You close their fingers around it, and when they open their hand, there's 2 of them instead of 1 of them. And I think one of the reasons this is my favorite is because it's not just about surprise, it's that they're holding the magic. It's happening in their hands, not my hands. And again, for a kid who's used to being kind of the passive recipient of instructions, or suddenly, they're suddenly in this place where the impossible is happening to them, around them, and that's a pretty big deal. So I would say that's like the kids, the adolescents, even the adults. But when I work with senior citizens, they really love card magic. Um, I think I think it's something they can connect to, especially if it's something where they're participating. They choose a card, or, that sort of thing. There I think all of the magic kind of comes back to this idea of being seen, being the one whose choice matters. I picked that card. I held that ball. I did that rubber band trick. And that resonates deeply with people who sometimes feel invisible in their day-to-day lives. I get to do a lot of work with veterans. And I think the trick that they often enjoy are the ones that they get to learn, and they perform it, but they also get to teach it to somebody else, because at that point, the trick is almost beside the point, because what magic is really doing is it's rebuilding that bridge to someone they love with something fun and low pressure. So I've had guys tell me that one trick gave them the first easy conversation that they've been able to have with somebody else or a member of their family, because it's really kind of organic. I say to you, "Hey, can I show you a magic trick?" And then you just kind of roll into it. So
Mhm.
it's that whole social sort of aspect of magic.
Yes, that's amazing. It's very restorative, it sounds like, and especially
Mm.
with all of the different populations you work with beyond students with autism, how you work with veterans and professionals and students in universities. And what do you think makes magic so universal among
Oh
all of those
gosh.
different populations? Because from what you've mentioned, it's such a unifying thing, and it lights people up in a way that it seems like some other things can't. So, what do you think makes it so universal for people?
Ah, boy, you know what? That's a really great question. I think because of all the people that I work with, when you look at it on paper, they couldn't be more different, right? You've got maybe a 9-year-old on the spectrum, or an 80-year-old in memory care, maybe a combat veteran who's just carrying trauma that most of us can't even imagine. The one thing that connects them all is wonder. Wonder is one of the few experiences that doesn't care how old you are, what language you speak, what you've been through, or what you're capable of. When something impossible happens right in front of your eyes, your brain just lights up the same way it did when you were a kid. I often say to people, so what the second rule of being a good magician is you never do the same trick for the same audience more than one time. And the reason that is because the first time we see a magic trick, wonder overtakes us and your brain goes, "What?" But the second time you see a magic trick, your brain knows what to expect. So it just kind of goes, "Hmm." So we want to be in the what, not the stage, right? So what research actually shows is that wonder bypasses a lot of filters that we build up over a lifetime. So for a child with autism, magic creates this predictable structure with a surprising payoff, which is exactly the kind of environment where they can get involved and take those risks, those social risks that they might not normally take. For a senior with dementia, this moment of wonder can pull them back into the present in a way that maybe doesn't happen with other things. And for a veteran with PTSD, learning a magic trick gives them something that I think is profoundly important for all of these, and that's a sense of agency. They get to be the one in control. They get to be the one creating the surprise instead of bracing for it. And the performance or presentation of a magic trick allows them to tell their story in a less threatening, less vulnerable way. So while the populations look very, very different on the surface, what they share is something deeply human. We all want to feel capable. We all want to feel connected. We all want a moment where the world feels a little bit bigger and more mysterious than it did 5 minutes ago. And magic gives us that. And it doesn't ask us to read well or to speak clearly or remember what we had for breakfast or trust a stranger who just came into the room, right? Magic just invites people in. And that's why I think it works across every population I've ever worked with, because underneath all of our differences, the longing for wonder is one of the most universal things about being human.
That's incredible. That's really incredible when I sit and think about it because and I'll tell you a little bit about my brother. My brother has autism and he attends Beyond the Spectrum here. But so, something that we have kind of tried to work on over the years with him is finding something that interests him like that. Finding something that gets him excited, that motivates him because if he doesn't want to do something, he's not going to do it. He's very like, okay, that's I'm just going to sit here because I have no interest. But so that's something we've kind of struggled with over the years is finding something that motivates him that he wants to do and so I think magic would be the perfect thing for him. After
And
sitting
you
and
know,
hearing you talk about all of these amazing things that it can do and just the agency that it gives people, I think that'd be a wonderful thing for him. So,
and there's so many connections, like, so many autistic kids or adolescents, maybe they love math or they love science or they love dinosaurs or
yeah.
they love trains or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Magic, yeah, magic, every magic trick is two things, math and science. Every magic trick is math and science.
Mm,
So it provides this opportunity to sometimes bring the things that they really love into a magic trick. Now, when you know the math and science, it kind of steals the wonder just a little bit. But for a lot of those kids, it is such a powerful way to take something that they already feel connected with and let them do something really meaningful with it.
That's great. That's amazing, and I know that's something we haven't really talked about a lot on this podcast is kind of the benefits of arts with the special
Mm.
needs population. We've never really touched that subject here, so this is just fascinating to hear all of the different levels to it and how it can benefit people in so many ways. And so I think it's so wonderful to hear how easily it blends in with like education and all these different settings. And so, um, I also just wanted to ask, with all of your experience that you've had in the education field and all of the work that you've done with universities and schools, have you noticed any particular trends that would maybe benefit from these arts integrated therapies or
Mm.
anything that is maybe happening that magic could heal or magic could spark something in?
So this is a loaded question. And there are a few trends that I've been watching closely, and honestly, some of them really concern me. But they also point to exactly why arts integrated approaches matter more right now than maybe they ever have before. The first thing I'd name is the engagement crisis. I mean, we see that teachers I talk to across the country are telling me the same thing. Kids are harder to reach than they used to be. Attention spans have shifted. Screens have completely rewired, what feels stimulating for us. And a lot of traditional instruction just can't compete with that. Here's something that I love that you said. The arts cut through that in a way very few other things can. When you walk into a classroom with a magic tricks or a piece of music or even a movement activity, you're not asking kids to pay attention. You're giving their brains a reason to want to pay attention. And you're engaging their entire system, their body, their mind, their spirit. The second trend is the social emotional piece. I'd really like to spend a minute here if I can focus on this for a second because I think this is something that we struggle with. We know that one of the challenges that autistic children face is the communication and social skills piece. And schools are finally acknowledging that you can't separate a child's ability to learn from their ability to regulate their emotions, to build relationships, and to feel safe. But a lot of the social emotional curricula that are being used deliver that in the same way that they teach math. Sit down, listen, fill out a worksheet. And what we know is that you can't teach a social emotional curriculum that way. You can use it to explicitly teach things like vocabulary or social scripts or cues or strategies. And that explicit type of instruction often produces performance without understanding. So the research shows us that the skills are rarely generalized into everyday life. Explicit instruction is really more effective for initial acquisition of social emotional and social cognitive skills. But implicit learning is essential for fluency, for transfer, for real world social application. So the arts offer something fundamentally different. They let kids practice these skills in motion, in real time, in connection with others, in ways that feel like play instead of learning or therapy. So, magic based teaching naturally creates the ideal bridge between explicit and implicit learning. And I think that combination is really powerful because social cognition is best learned when concepts are made explicit but experienced. And, uh, and I don't think we do that very well. There's a third trend that pops into my mind, and this one is pretty close to my heart, and that's this idea around inclusion, this conversation around inclusion. We've gotten so much better at talking about neurodiversity, but we haven't always gotten better at designing learning spaces where neurodiverse learners can actually thrive. So, arts integrated strategies are remarkable here because they offer multiple entry points. A kid who can't show you what they know on a written test might be able to show you brilliantly through a performance or a drawing or a sequence of movements. I think we've been measuring the wrong things for a long time, and the arts help us see kids more completely. Um, our education system has historically measured this narrow band of what a child can do. And then we treat that narrow band as if it represents the entire child. A few specific examples would be things like reading and writing as the primary proof of knowing. It, but if a child can't read fluently or can't put their thoughts on paper, we just come to this conclusion that they don't know the material. But a kid with autism or a kid with dyslexia or a kid with a language processing difference or a kid who's still learning English may understand a concept deeply, but have no way to show it through the channel we've decided counts. So I think we've been measuring the channel, but not the comprehension. And I also, yeah, I also think that we put a lot of pressure on kids to sit still. And we think sitting, right? And we think sitting is evidence of learning. I remember when I was in school, and you can tell, I mean, I'm up and down in this chair even now. Um, when I was in school, there was no way I was going to stay in my seat, you know? But my teachers were awesome. They would just come by my desk and kinda tap on it and go, "Kevin, do you need to go to the back of the room?" It's like, "I do." And I would just get up and take my book to the back of the room. Didn't mean I wasn't listening, you know, and it didn't mean I wasn't paying attention. I think sitting I don't think we can look at sitting still as learning. It's compliance. And we've been measuring yes, and we've been measuring the appearance of attention rather than attention itself. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of people in a classroom. We also think that verbal participation is this proxy for engagement. So the kid who raises their hand and answers the question out loud gets credit for being engaged. But there are so many of our students who process internally and they need more time, who communicate better through making or drawing or doing. And that often gets read as being disengaged. And I think we've conflated extroversion with intelligence. And I think those are two completely different things. And then we reward those kids, right, who put their hands up the
Oh,
quickest,
I remember those
right?
days. Yeah,
Right? And you're like, those hands can go up so fast before you even have processed the question. Somebody's
yeah.
kids up in the air. And we think, oh, the kids who think fast, those are the kids who think well. But a child who arrives at a deeper understanding more slowly is often penalized for the very thing that makes their thinking really valuable. So I'm going to throw out, I'm not a huge fan of standardized tests. I'm not. But we see it with standardized tests. It's the snapshot of ability. A single stakes test on a single day in a single format captures this tiny sliver of what a child knows and what they can do. It tells you nothing about that kid's creativity, their persistence, their collaboration, their problem solving in real world contexts, or the ability to apply their knowledge in novel situations. Um, which brings me to one more thing that just came up because I'm bouncing here in my chair. Um, we often think of behavior as character. So when a child acts out, we've often measured that as a character issue rather than a communication issue. That, you know, if behavior is information, when we measure misbehavior, we miss that the child is actually trying to tell us something. And so here's why I think the arts are just so amazing. What the arts do differently is open up multiple channels for a child to demonstrate what they know and who they are. So a kid who can't write a paragraph about the Civil War, but who can get up and perform a monologue from the perspective of a soldier, they can show you that they really do understand the Civil War. Or a kid who can't pass a vocabulary quiz might use exact words correctly in a song that they write. Or sometimes a student who's labeled low functioning might choreograph a movement piece that reveals really sophisticated thinking about cause and effect or sequence and emotion. So I don't look at the arts as lowering the bar. I think what the arts do is widen the doorway. So when I say we've been measuring the wrong things, I mean we've been measuring this narrow set of skills as if they were the whole picture. And we're dismissing the kids who couldn't perform on those specific measures as if they had less to offer. And the arts help us to see a child um, who couldn't maybe show up, uh, who maybe couldn't show us their thinking in one way. They might show it in another way. And I think that's just I think that's just really really important to give them all of those different ways to show us what they know.
Yeah, that's I completely agree with you, and it's so true, and especially because, like you mentioned, how participation looks so different for
Oh,
neurodiverse learners. They may not be making eye contact, they may not be being the first person to raise their hand, but they're still getting that information and they're still processing it. And like you mentioned, I'll tell you, my brother, he's very limited verbally, but so that's kind of led him in certain experiences that he's had when he was younger that had kind of gotten him written off a little bit as not being, engaging or not being intelligent, but he is incredibly smart and he can pick up on patterns with people. And I'll tell you, he's very helpful at home. He likes to help me with like everything when I'm at home. He gets my things and he knows where to put them and he organizes everything in the kitchen. Very, very helpful. But he would be written off by people because he couldn't verbally explain those things. But so I
yeah,
think
that's
it's
so
yeah.
sad. That's just
Mhm.
so sad that we judge people. We make a determination about somebody's intelligence
Yeah,
based on words that they use.
right.
I just yeah, yeah.
Right. And so I think it's so wonderful that the arts can come in and kind of create that space for them to
Yeah.
have that voice in a way that's
And I
maybe
think
beyond verbal.
and I think teachers need to have a better understanding of that.
Yeah.
That, the arts aren't just this like thing that you go to art class or music class for. I think there are these ways that the arts can be integrated into their instruction. That's what my course is all about. These arts integrated methods of teaching academic content through the arts. Because when you engage or when you integrate the arts thoughtfully, you don't just get better engagement. You get better retention, better executive function, better social outcomes, better mental health markers. It's becoming really clear to us that the arts are a strategic intervention with measurable impact. So, if I had one thing to say to like administrators or teachers or policymakers, it would be this: the arts are the arts are not a reward you give kids after they've done the hard work of learning. The arts are how a lot of kids do the hard work of learning. And the
Yeah.
sooner we build our systems around that truth, I think the better off everybody's going to be.
Exactly. And that's wonderful. I think that's exactly what, teachers and professionals need to hear is all of the benefits and all of the ways that it reaches students in ways that a textbook and a paper
Mm.
essay wouldn't be able to. It activates so many more things than sitting and still and listening in class. I mean, I know I struggled with that, and I think anybody can struggle with that. So it's,
I definitely struggled with
yeah,
that.
yeah, I just don't understand how that's still a measurement of intelligence. I mean, it's all compliance, but
Yeah,
I
yes.
could go on about that for ever. But, so have you ever I know this is kind of a switch, but have you ever come across people that maybe don't see the benefits of magic or don't agree with it? Any kind of, like, naysayer or somebody that's just doesn't agree? Like, how do you respond to people that kinda criticize the the magic and the work that you do?
Mm. Well, I think there's always some skepticism about the program's effectiveness when people first hear about it. And I think part of that is it's really not an easy concept to grasp right away. Even in our conversation, there are all these things that we're talking about, the cognitive aspects of learning a magic trick, the motor aspects of manipulating the props, the communication aspects, because it's receptive communication when they're learning the trick, but now they're going to perform the trick. So now it's expressive communication. It's the idea around social cognition. Not just being a good performer, but being a good audience member. What does it mean to take turns? What does it mean to be a good audience member? And then I think this idea around creativity or flexible thinking, problem solving, critical thinking. For our students with a special education classification, we do a horrible job of teaching them problem solving and critical thinking skills. And because we don't do that, because we teach them so much by rote, we move them through the system and then we graduate them and we put them in a world that is not a rote world. And we set them up for failure because we haven't given them those skills. But the arts are such a great way to teach that critical thinking and problem solving. And I'm going to be partial towards magic. I think magic tricks are just a really, really fun way to do that. So when I first started doing this work, the skepticism stung just a little bit. But over time, I came to understand that skepticism is fair. If someone walked up to me and said they developed a juggling based intervention for stroke recovery, my first instinct would be to raise an eyebrow and go, really? So, healthy skepticism is how good fields stay good. So, instead of trying to overcome it, I think what I learned to do is just to kind of lean into it a little bit. So, what I usually do now is I invite the person in, that skeptical person in, because today we have testimonials, we have academic credibility. I can point people to peer reviewed studies. I can point people to the work we do in major medical centers around the world, or the occupational therapy literature, or the neuroscience around wonder and curiosity and prediction. So now there's a body of evidence that I didn't have access to 20 years ago. But here's the other thing that I learned. Sometimes the skepticism isn't really about the evidence. Sometimes they're skeptical because they're uncomfortable. Uh, People are uncomfortable with the idea that something playful could actually do serious work, because we have a cultural bias that says if it's fun, it can't be rigorous. If it makes people laugh, it can't be transforming. And so a lot of what I do in a quiet way is kind of push back against that bias. And so now I just like kind of let the work speak for itself, because the truth is, I don't feel like I have to defend the program anymore. The research does, the teachers do, the clinicians do, the kids do. The parents at a dinner table whose son or daughter has something to share for the first time in their lives, they they know what this is all about. So my job at this point is just to keep showing up, to keep doing the work with integrity, to keep building the evidence base. The skeptics are going to come and go, and they're either going to come around or they're not. But either way, the work's going to keep going.
Right. That's amazing. That's amazing. Just all of it. All of it is so like, I'm just taking all of this information in, just about, like, the world of magic and all the ways that it can impact these different communities and these populations, and this is just fascinating to me. Just to see it from this level and to hear your insight on it is just fascinating to me. But, so if you could give maybe any advice to parents or educators that are kind of looking to incorporate magic like this into their students' lives, maybe at home or in the classroom, is there anything you would suggest to them, or, anything for them to get started and kind of incorporating that way of learning and that way of teaching, learning and teaching, in a setting?
So the first thing I'd say is don't put too much pressure on yourself to be a magician. This is what
Okay.
I hear from teachers all the time. Well, I think this would be really cool, but I'm not a magician, I'm a teacher. Or I hear it from a therapist. Oh, I can see where these magic tricks really do work, but I'm an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. I'm not a magician. So the first thing I'd say is don't put pressure on yourself to be a magician. I've worked with thousands of teachers and thousands of parents who were absolutely convinced they couldn't do this. And within 20 minutes, they were performing magic tricks that had their kids fully engaged. The barrier to entry is much lower than people think. Now, I don't know what that says about magic, so I'm just gonna kinda let that settle there. You know, Within the program, we've carefully selected and researched every trick in the program to make sure that they're easy enough to learn, but that they're good enough to actually fool people. I mean, that's what we want. If they learn the trick, we want them to have that immediate gratification of learning the trick and being able to perform it. But we also want them to be motivated enough to want to learn something that's more difficult, so we can keep working on those skills. So, what you do need is a willingness to be a beginner in front of your kids or in front of your students. And honestly, I think that's a gift in itself, because when a child sees an adult learning something new, fumbling with it, practicing it, getting better at it, that's modeling something very important. We spend so much time telling our kids it's okay to make mistakes, but we don't want to make any mistakes in front of them. And learning a magic trick is a beautiful, low stakes way to kind of show them what learning looks like in real time. When we allow children to learn creatively, and this is what I love about a magic trick, no one should know how to do a magic trick. That's the entire point of magic, right? It's a secret. And because of that, making mistakes and learning from them is a part of the process. And when we allow kids to learn creatively, we remove the stressors of being right, that are so pronounced in the lives of our kids. And we give them permission to take risks and to make mistakes. But through those mistakes, they develop really important skills like resilience, flexibility, adaptability, critical thinking, problem solving. So, my first piece of advice, a practical advice, would be start small. Pick one trick, learn it well enough that you can do it without thinking, then perform it and watch the reaction that you get. And then I think my second piece is don't tell them the secret right away. Let them sit in the wonder of that for a minute, because that space between "What?" just happened and "Oh, that's how it works." In that space is some of the best cognitive activity. That's where the really rich stuff happens. And when you do teach them the trick, and you should, I think you should, make it feel like an invitation, an initiation, like they're being let in on something special because they are. They are being let in on something special. And they work so hard to kind of learn that trick, to master that trick because they want to show it to somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's amazing. That's great.
And I think for a kid, you're talking about your brother. I think for a kid
Yeah.
who usually struggles socially, uh, being the one with the knowledge to share is pretty transformative. So not only do they learn the trick and perform the trick, they can teach the trick to somebody else. And in teaching the trick, that kind of solidifies, if you can teach it, you really know it and understand it. For parents specifically, I'd say, m- make this a shared ritual because some of the best magic at home stories I've ever heard come from families who learn a magic trick together over a weekend and then they perform it for somebody over FaceTime or something. Because it's not about the trick, it's about the time you spent practicing it together. And the trick is just an excuse for that connection.
Yeah, that's such an amazing way to frame it. And I love that. I love everything about that. And I just think that everything that you've shared with us today on this episode is just such powerful insight into what's happening when
Uh,
you integrate the arts in such a meaningful way to all these diverse populations and all the ways that it empowers them and gives them that confidence. And so I just want to thank you for sharing the information that you have with us today, Kevin. And if there's any way, how can listeners connect with you further? How can they learn more, reach out if they'd want to do maybe a workshop or hear more? What are your best ways of connection?
there are really several ways that they can reach out to me. I think the easiest way is just to head over to my website, which is my name, Kevin Spencer Live.com, because
Perfect.
everything kind of connects from there. There's information about the programs, the research, my speaking schedule, how to bring this work to your school or hospital or community. There's also some really fun ways you can do this. I published my first children's book this fall called The Fantastic Four Magic Club. Um, and that book is a great story about 4 kids who discover that magic is more than just tricks. It's a way to build friendship and confidence and belonging. But throughout the book, as these kids learn the tricks, there are QR codes in the books that you can scan, and it'll take you to a video of me, and you can learn the trick right along with the kids in the book, which is kinda cool. So, for if you're a teacher or a caregiver or a parent, Rutledge just published a book called Teach Like a Magician. That book is really talks more about bringing wonder into your work, engagement, a genuine connection. So it walks you through all the principles that magicians use to capture and hold an audience and how those same principles can be used in your living room or in your classroom. And you don't have to even learn a single magic trick to benefit them from those concepts because it really is about the craft of engagement. The more work on, more information about the Hocus Focus program is there's a website specifically for that called hocusfocuseducation.com. Uh, Clinicians, therapists can go over to magictherapy.com. I have way too many websites. But beyond the books, like if you don't want to go to the website, if you don't want to go to any of the websites, you just want to reach out to me, please, by all means, just reach out to me because I read every email that comes in. And so if you got a question or a story or a child that you're just trying to reach, a program you want to start, just reach out to me. Some of the most meaningful collaborations I've ever had come from a single email where somebody said, "Hey, I heard you on a podcast and I think we need to talk." Do that.
Yeah.
Reach out to me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that is amazing. So, we just want to thank you for joining us today and for just sharing more about all the magic that magic can do. And so, thank you for being here today, Kevin. And we would love to have you out to Beyond the Spectrum sometime and to maybe meet our kids and do some magic if you could, or speak to our teachers about incorporating these incredible things into their classrooms. But we just appreciate your time today and all of the amazing insight and the thoughtfulness that you gave with all of their answers to my questions and this conversation.
Thank
So
you.
it's just so appreciated.
Thank you so much for letting me be on. This was just a real privilege. I'm passionate about this. I can see you're passionate about this. And the world right now could just use a little more magic in it. So
Absolutely.
thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining us here today at Helping Families Go Beyond, the podcast by Beyond the Spectrum. For more resources or information, visit our website at beyondthespectrum.org.